You're listening to Randy BOI and the Bois podcast. Get ready to have your minds blown with entertainment.
Welcome back to Randy BOI and the Bois podcast. This is a podcast where we like to talk about movies and TV shows that have influence to some way, shape, or form, positive or negative. Today, we ain't going to be talking about no movies or TV shows. Everybody's gone today. I'm even gone on a mission. We're all out doing missions. But today, I'm going to introduce you to one of our specialists. He is a monster hunting specialist. And he, you can call him codename D Junior 008. He is a monster specialist, and he recently has written a short story about one of his experiences that actually involves me and Schoolboy from a long time ago. It's a story about an Appalachian monster, because that's where our base is set up, and we do most of our hunting in the Appalachian Mountains. And so it's about a monster in Appalachia, one of the hardest monsters it was ever for us to hunt. And so he's going to tell you a little bit about that and read you his story. Hope you guys enjoy.
Hi, you can call me Codename Junior. Codename D Junior 008. Today I'm going to be telling you a story about our monster hunting expedition not too long ago. It takes place within the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountains is where we keep our base. It is a supernatural hotspot for aliens, monsters, and other supernaturals. Today, I'm going to be telling you the story of the Howler. For those of you not familiar with a Howler, in Appalachia, a hollow is referred to as a holler. They replace the OW with an ER. Now, let's get started with the story. It all started with reports of a panther-like sound coming from the depths of what the locals called Stupid Face Howler. Animal control was called to the scene, but they did not understand what they were seeing. The prints, they looked more human than Big Cat, but the scratches on the trees, the hair, the stool, it all resembled that of a big cat. But the only big cats native to the area are bobcats and mountain lions. Other animals that walk on all fours that are kind of big are bear, fox, coyote, deer. And none of these resembled the prints that were on the ground. They thought it could be a mountain lion, but this mountain lion would have been the biggest mountain lion they have ever seen. It must have been bigger than a tiger. It even had to have been bigger than a saber-toothed tiger, and those have been extinct for a while. What could this be? They were perplexed. They thought maybe it was a Bigfoot, but we all know around that time Bigfoot lived out west. For we all know that Bigfoot is a big swimmer, and when it snows in the mountains, he goes to warm areas like the desert. So, out of frustration, Animal Control contacted the city council, and one of the members of city council contacted Skullboy. As for Skullboy, is the only one that can get a hold of me for security reasons. Him and Randy BOI are the only ones who can control when they can contact me. Thus, the story begins. When Skullboy contacted me, I instantly knew what was up. I have encountered the same situation a few counties down, a few years ago. So had he. He had just forgotten, for Skullboy is not the How do you say the expression? For he is not the brightest crown in the box. I never really brought that investigation up much, because in my eyes, it was one of my biggest failures in life. For months, I tracked and stalked that thing wherever it went. For months, every time I thought I was getting hot on his trail, whoosh, just like that, the trail was gone. Day after day, week after week, the same result. Finally, I had to tell myself that there were others out there that needed me, needed my skill set, other monsters to find, other monsters to kill. I told myself that it would be okay, that this monster didn't do anything wrong, it just makes a lot of noise. But little did I know, once I let that monster get somewhat comfortable, after I let it rest, little did I know what was coming my way. Little did I know the bloodshed, the blood that would be on my hands. If I knew that, I never would have stopped. I would have kept going, even till I collapsed. Trust me, if I could turn back time, if I could find a way, I would. So some time went by. I was out on a welfare check for Randy, for we had just discovered a Martian-like creature in a lake. But that turned out to be a mutated fish, for the company that was by the lake was doing some illegal experimentation with chemicals. Needless to say, after that, we had to spend some time in the hospital. But that's a story from another time. So, I get done doing the welfare check. I get a call from Skullboy. He is distraught. I sent him up to some of the areas that had some high traffic from the monster, so he could keep an eye on the situation while I was away. I asked him what was wrong. He kept crying. He was hysterical. I finally had to hang up. I texted him, "Tell me where you are. Tell me your location and do not move unless your life is in immediate danger." I hopped in my truck and began to speed to his location. I opened up the Find My Phone app because I had his number in there and I wanted to make sure that he was still where he was. I saw that he began to move fast. I realized he must have been in a vehicle, so I called him. I instantly became frustrated, for he was hungry, he said. He said he was going to Burger King. The nearest Burger King to that location was 45 minutes away. I instantly get angry. I say, "Please turn around, Skullboy. Please, I need you in that location." So he did. Finally, I arrived on the scene. I get out of my truck, and I notice the smell of death. It was pungent. I still taste that taste in my mouth today. It was stuck in my mouth then. It made me choke. Skullboy was on a tree stump a few yards away. I had to swallow that taste and keep going, for I had a job to do. I see the bodies on the ground, freshly torn open, blood-soaked area. It was disgusting. "Skullboy," I said, "you must buck up, for we have a job to do. If it's not us, then who will catch this thing? Who will avenge these squirrels? He will keep killing every goddamn squirrel that will cross his path. We must end this monster. Finally, Skullboy rose to his feet. His tears began to dry. We began to bury the squirrels, and then proceeded to look for the next of kin. We stumbled upon what seemed to be the cousins of the dead squirrels. We explained the situation. They were distraught. We vowed to them, we will catch this thing, and we will end its life, and you will have justice, and you will have the closure you need. After the mini squirrel funeral, me and Skullboy got back to work, though it did not last long, as we ran out of leads. This event was 2 whole years ago. I had given up hope of ever finding this monster. I thought, those poor squirrels will never have the closure they need. Until Skullboy's most recent call about the mysterious activity at Stupid Face Howler. As soon as Skullboy described the situation, I knew we were back in the fight. It had been 2 whole years since the day of the dead squirrels. The day I call Death Day, or D-Day for short. I needed this fight, for those squirrels haunt my nightmares every night. There was an emptiness inside me. I needed to fulfill it. Even nuts began to taste like hard-covered smoked nightmares. Depending on the nut, that is. So I packed my gear, threw it in the truck, stopped by the local speedway to get a couple rolls of Copenhagen wintergreen for Skullboy, and a couple pouches of beech nut for myself. I stopped by Skullboy's trailer to pick him up. He got in the front seat, put his gear in the back. He was chilling in the front seat, gear in the back. Fun, 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 going to kill a monster on a Friday. Finally, we reached our destination. We set up camp about 4 miles from the mouth of Stupid Face Howler. We set up a blind, then began to set up tree cams around heavy tracked areas. We then began phase 1 of our operation, surveillance. After a few days of surveillance, I began to notice a pattern. The last time I tracked the monster, I could never find its nest, for it never backtracked. It seemed like his tracks just seemingly disappeared. But now I'm starting to notice that when the tracks begin to disappear, more trees become broken, scratched,
crackle,
limbs snapped
break,
on the ground.
crackle,
I come to a conclusion. He only stays on the ground for so long before he moves to the trees to travel. This leads me to another conclusion. He can only stay in areas that are heavily dense with tall, strong trees. This could come into my advantage later. After phase 1 was successfully completed, we began phase 2 of the operation, night mobile reconnaissance. We began to sleep all day so we could hunt at night. We went out looking for patterns of broken tree limbs, stamped brush, and scratch marks in the bark. We started to notice a pattern, so we started marking trees that became more and more worn. We would mark these trees with yellow flags, and then we would move our tree cams to better position to what you would say to confine the radius of the monster to a smaller area or of some sort. Finally, we had the target within a radius of a half mile. Our tree cams were still being avoided, but we started to pick up sounds, even breathing from the beast. The monster knew we were closing in as well. Fast for one night, it sent us a message. One night after hunting, we came back to find our camp destroyed, but it left the food. It sent us a message. It was telling us it wanted to play. I felt like I was in the movie Predator. With this escalation, we decided it's time to install the third and final phase of our operation, aka Scooby-Doo that motherfucker, aka Bait and Trap. It was the 40th night in those mountains. 40 long nights. Eating scraps. Not being able to sleep in a normal sleep schedule. And that night was the night we decided to end this thing once and for all. Me and Skullboy began to mentally prepare for what was going to be the fight of our lives. I began to pray to Lord Stamos, for I am a follower of the Lord and Savior John Stamos. The Church of Stamos does not sponsor or condone what I'm saying in these words. Skullboy began to pray to the leader of the alien race, Zoloff. We said our prayers. Now it's time to set our plan in motion. So it began. We needed to move hard. We needed to move fast. So me and Skullboy hop on my dirt bike. I revved that fucker up and then we're off into the night. Only being guided by a small spotlight that I mounted to the handlebars a few years ago. On our way through the trees, I began to question my own humanity. Have I become a predator myself? Am I no better than the beast hunting down innocent squirrels and ravaging them, taking their lives? Am I a monster of a man? Or am I a man of a monster? There was no time for these questions. I just said my catchphrase to keep my feet on the ground that I use, which is ball with a ball 24/7. That made me refocused. We head to checkpoint number 1, where I let Skullboy off to where he can change into his squirrel costume. And then I head off to checkpoint number 2. At checkpoint number 2, I had a little blind set up. This is where I set up my tripod and my rifle. The night before, I dialed in my scope, but the elements, they were different, so I had to adjust. Skullboy began to slowly approach the location. The night before, we measured it and did all that kind of strategic stuff, so we knew what we were doing. So Skullboy began to approach the final tree that we said that we would call it, but he calls it other things sometimes. Now that my scope was dialed in, I put in my last pinch of beech nut and began to say one last prayer to Lord Stamos. I says, Lord Stamos, let my bullet fly with speed, accuracy, and fury. Please let it penetrate this monster and let it spill the brains of the monster on this here hollowed ground. For I am a loyal follower. This I command you. It was time to conclude this. All this time, all this preparation, all this heartache, it was going to end now. This thing was going to end with this monster gurgling on its own goddamn blood, looking at its intestines spill from his body. Now, it's time to focus. Skullboy, now in his squirrel costume, begins to approach the final tree. I begin to notice that the moon was particularly bright that night. I've not seen a full moon this bright in ages. Even through all the trees and all the brush, it still shined through to put a spotlight on Skullboy. I begin to notice his shadow, merely mimicking him and not identically following his movements. This is when I knew something was wrong. Before I could even get the words, "Oh shit, Skullboy, run, run, run," out of my mouth, he vanished. And as quickly as he vanished, he reappeared, running, sprinting, screaming, packing his can of Copenhagen wintergreen, trying to get a pinch while he ran from the monster. What a fucking idiot! I quickly rise from my blind, hop on my Kawasaki, and begin to bolt towards Skullboy. I get right up on his tail, his fake squirrel tail, which gets caught in the front tire and help launches him onto the bike. Then the pursuit begins. We began to bolt back towards camp, avoiding every rock, every tree, every stump, only being guided by the dying spotlight, for I had forgot to bring extra batteries. We were just a mere few hundred yards from camp, and the beast was not in sight. Until suddenly, a tree came booming down out of the sky, and with it, a figure leaping right toward us. I could see death. It was approaching fast, merely seconds away. Oh, the humanity. Oh, my life is going to end. Suddenly, I hear a lever cock, and then, just like that, a boom, which led to my ears ringing. It had seemed that Skullboy had placed a 30-30 rifle in his squirrel costume for just-in-case purposes. It grazed the monster. The monster leaped out of the way, and then back into the darkness. We had time to recoup. We get back up on our bike, and then we head in a direction, an unknown direction at that. I had no idea where we were going, neither did Skullboy. All I knew was to go, go, go. We ended up in Briar. Man, did that hurt, scratching us, clawing at us for what seemed like an eternity. And then the monster gained lots of ground, for it did not care about the briar, and then it was right back on our tail. I once again heard the lever of the 30-30 cock, and then with it, a boom, and then a confident miss. Then I heard Skullboy quietly say, 4 more chances, for he had only had 6 rounds in the rifle, and he already had taken 2 shots. I began to get kind of angry that Skullboy would bring a rifle that could only have 6 shots. But then I remembered I'm in a high pursuit chase and I need to keep going. It is funny how even in high stakes situations, ADHD can still bleed through. I could hear the monster behind us, and then another cock, another boom, and another miss. And then another cock, another boom, and then another miss. And then another cock, another boom, and another miss. I was counting the rounds in my head every time I heard a boom, and I knew we were on 1, and I knew we were screwed. I began to notice more light bleeding through the darkness. Up ahead I could see a clearing in the trees, which would come to our advantage, for the monster does not move well without the trees. But then I started noticing the ground was disappearing. I thought it was just because of the dying spotlight that I couldn't see ahead, but little did I know we were at the cliff edge of Stupid Face Rock. We approached the edge faster and faster. It was like in an old western where they had the wagon fights, but instead of a wagon, it was a 150cc Kawasaki dirt bike that I got for Christmas when I was 16 years old. Now, we had to jump. It looked like GTA and that motherfucker leaping from the bike as we watched it plummet to its death. Whoa, the agony! Whoa, the pain! Ow! My arm began to throb. I quickly got up to check on Skullboy, but he was back on his feet, rifle mounted on his knee, looking, aiming into the darkness. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Skullboy was launched into the black abyss. I screamed, "No! No!" Just like when Obi-Wan saw Qui-Gon Jinn die at the hands of Darth Maul. In many ways, this was very much like that scene, and in many ways, Qui-Gon Jinn was very much like Skullboy. Skullboy was my Qui-Gon Jinn. I pulled my .45 from my side and began blasting. This too was just like Star Wars, because I, just like stormtroopers, couldn't hit a goddamn thing. I got 3 rounds off before the thing was on me, beating the shit out of me ruthlessly. I then began to fight back. I start throwing long techniques to keep it at bay. and then I fake a jab and go for the single leg takedown, which I finish. He ends up on top of me, but I get half guard, which I turn into an electric chair submission. I begin to try to tear his leg off until I hear a loud pop. He begins to holler like the beast he is. I then start hunting for other limbs, which I get an arm, and I get him in a Kimura, and I detach it from his shoulder, which just pissed the monster off, because just like that, he grabs me and starts Hulk smashing me into a tree. Once again, I can see my life fleeting before my eyes. The beast's ugly mug fading into darkness. I begin to fade into darkness. Slowly, the light becomes dark. Until I hear a cock. I hear a boom. And then I hear a confident, "Zero, motherfucker." That's when it clicked. That's right, Zero. He shot his last shot, and he made it count. And just like that, Skullboy standing over the right shoulder of the beast stood there in the moonlight like a knight in shining armor. He was my knight in shining armor. The monster began to slowly drop, and then I began to feel a warm liquid begin to now hit my bootless feet. The monster and I now finally hit the blood-soaked ground. I was in pain. I needed an Advil to say the least. Skullboy dropped his rifle and began to sprint in my direction as fast as he possibly could, for he too was pretty fucked up. He hobbled and hobbled till he approached me. He then picked me up, blood falling from my clothes. Skullboy put his arm around me, and I put my arm around him. We had both broken our legs, so used our opposite legs to become some sort of super person to hold each other up. We then both proceed to reach for our pockets at the same time. Skullboy's hands emerging with a can of Copenhagen wintergreen, my hand emerging with a fresh pouch of beech nut. The monster, somehow still alive, began to open one eye. I then put in my fresh new beech nut, pulled out my .45. I spit my beech nut in that dude's eye, and then proceeded to shoot it with my .45. For me and a Skullboy can survive. It was finally over. The monster that had been terrorizing squirrels for, I don't know, a long time now, has finally died. Me and Skullboy had finally completed the mission that started so long ago. We needed to get out of that mountain, but we lost our only source of transportation when my Kawasaki went over the edge of Stupid Face Rock. We then proceeded to wobble till we could find cell service, so Skullboy could call Randy and we could get an evac. Luckily, Randy Boy was already on his way, for we did not do our hourly check-in, and he was concerned. Little over an hour later, I saw a light coming from a Polaris, which is Randy Boy's four-wheeler. I saw the light, and it seared my cornea, but that time was the only time that a headlight searing my cornea ever felt orgasmic, because I was bleeding out, and I really didn't want to die. Randy Boy proceeded to load me and Skullboy up onto the Polaris. This is when I blacked out. I remember waking up in a hospital a few hours later, all covered in stitches and whatnot. This concludes the story of the Howler, Howler, Howler thing. Wait! There's an epilogue! A few weeks after I recovered, I returned to the scene of the crime with the dead squirrels from a long time ago. I went there to tell them I had avenged them. I could not find the presumed cousins of the squirrels. They must have got a new place somewhere down the road and had moved. But I had left a note on the headstones describing the situation and telling them about the other hero named Skullboy. And now, hopefully, they receive the note and have closure. After I went to that location, I decided to go see if I could find the body of the beast. I went back to Stupid Face Howler, even though I never wanted to see that place again. I needed closure myself. I needed to make sure that it was dead. I got to the top of the cliff rock. Little did I know that the snow had melted all. So there was not even a trace of what happened on that night. The blood was gone, the body was gone, everything that happened that night was gone. I presumed that maybe a bear or something ate the body, and that I should just let the paranoia go that it might still be running around out there. I proceeded to go home and take a break, for I needed a much needed R&R. Now that I'm recording this and telling you the story, and then I'm going to write it. It's been some time now, but I'm still scared. I never want to experience anything like that again. Let me tell you. What was that noise? Skullboy, are you messing with me in there? Wait a minute. Skullboy left last night. Oh, shit.